We go to Tremaine Lee, our reporter, who's at the Clayton County Courthouse. And Tremaine, I understand you have some new information regarding the governor.
Yes, I just spoke with, community organizations and a number of clergy. The governor has called a 4 p.m. meeting with clergy ahead of whatever the prosecutor's announcement will be. Again, at 4 o'clock, the governor will be convening some sort of meeting with clergy. Now, we know that the clergy has played a heavy role, especially in the recent weeks, of trying to keep tensions low, trying to cool the tensions that have been kind of rising and cranking up a bit. And so as soon as we figure out, what that meeting is about, what's been discussed, we'll make sure we get it out there.
All right, let's hold on for me a little bit, Tremaine. Let's bring in Tori Russell, who's the co-founder of Hands Up United and who joins me now, has been part of these protests. And I don't know if you were able to hear Tremaine Lee's reporting, Tori, but the governor has now called for a meeting at 4 p.m. Eastern time this afternoon with members of the clergy. We know an announcement is coming. Tell me how you and your fellow activists, how are you feeling in anticipation of this announcement?
We just want justice, man. We just want simple justice. Same things that we marched for was an indictment. We're anxious, and we want an indictment. We want some justice. Some systematic things must change, and so we're just waiting, just like everyone else.
And Tori, what if there is not an indictment? What will be the next steps for Hands Up United for your activism in the case or in the event that there is no indictment of this officer?
We're going to go out and protest the same thing that if it is an indictment. There are many things, systematic racism, racial bias locally and nationally with the police force. You can look at Von Derek Myers, a 12-year-old boy just killed, a killed girlie in New York. These are national issues and local issues. We just want people to know that Ferguson is everywhere. It's not just one place, and these things have to change.
And do you anticipate that your protest, that your activism is going to continue once this case is resolved? And if so, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to see change nationally?
We want systematic change. You could go to the Dream Defenders or Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of groups who've come here who echo the same things that we're saying. The educational system, the judicial system, the policing. It's a lot of things, even the political system and how it's set up. We need changes that are tangible, and we need some tangible things to change for us. And the first step is getting an indictment on Darren Wilson.
Tori Russell, and one last question. Do you plan to include in that activism the elections that are coming up next year? There are odd year elections in Missouri, including for some members of the city council. Do you plan to be involved in that?
Most definitely. I think people think that young people are not politically minded. I just want to send a reminder out. If the police is harassing us every day, then you just seen the same thing in November. Police harass us on the way to the polls, out the polls, and when we're in the polling stations.
And Tori, I don't know if you can hold on for me, but I really do thank you for being here. Tori Russell from Hands Up United. I want to go to Anthea Butler. Anthea, because you have some institutional memory to talk a little bit about where this activism has gone. These are very young people. They see their activism as much broader than Ferguson. What difference do you suppose that they've made in these 108 days?
I think they've made a profound difference. The way that they've used social media to get out the message, the publication of a newsletter every day about what's happening there in Ferguson, the ways in which people from all over the country have come in on buses, to be there for Ferguson Days of Action. At the University of Pennsylvania, I have a group of students who every Friday, they do Ferguson Fridays, and they do sort of reenactments of what the historical things that are surrounding what is happening in Ferguson right now. So what I think this is a new movement. I think it's very interesting, Jay Nixon, to call in all the clergy, because what he hopes is that the clergy is going to be able to tamp down any anger. But I actually think that in this instance, that perhaps that's not really the point. The point really is that what the governor wants is to make this, using religion as this tool to make sure that people aren't righteously angry. And I think there's a right to be righteously angry when we have 3 young men dead and no justice in Ferguson. And in the city of St. Louis. So, I really have not liked the manner in which the government officials have tried to use religious ways and means to try to tamp down what has happened. I think it is a travesty what they have done.
All right, Melvin.
And if I were clergy, I wouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Professor Butler is mentioning the activism here. I think that's an important separate part of this story. And it is a positive part of this story when you look at what most of this peaceful activism has done. We are covering this today as national news. The president spoke out about it this weekend, as did the attorney general, as have Republican leaders like Senator Rand Paul. Why? Because of the activists, because of the organizing, because of the groundswell. And so when you take a step back as the nation watches this, that's the difference between a local and a national story. It's a national story because it has percolated around the nation and because people care about it. Now, you mentioned the elections, and I was down covering a midterm race in a different state in Texas. I was in predominantly African-American churches, and Ferguson was an issue people were talking about. Not because it was literally a local issue that was going to be addressed there, but because it had become yet another example, yet another name. And to systemic reform, part of the positive part of the discussion, a place where people are saying, all right, I've learned what the laws are, I've learned how the system's working, and whether or not in this instance that is fair or not, and we don't know all the facts and results yet, people coming together and saying, let's make it a national issue, let's make it last, let's not be forgotten, and let's talk about change. And so it's so easy, as you know, Joy, and you've been covering this, with tons of effort and tons of sources from around the country. It's so easy sometimes to be looking at what is the next thing and what is scary here, and all the precautions we've been covering of people trying to make sure that whatever happens over the coming days are peaceful and not violent. And yet, as you've said, most of the activism has been peaceful, and some of it, amidst a tragedy, a loss of life, some of it has been positive.
Yeah, and we're going to thank you very much, Ari.
Thank you.
I know you have to prep. You have a whole other show that you have to do, it turns out, after this hour, and I want to let you prep for that.